Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Navigating Through Life as a BAME student. I just want to let everyone know this conference will now be recorded. If you wish for your face not to be recorded, you're more than welcome to disable your camera. Yeah, I'll keep this on for a minute so those who are joining us now can see this. Okay, so I'm literally going to give you guys a breakdown of our schedule today. So what's going to be happening for the next 90 minutes. So to begin, I will be giving you guys information about the research I conducted, which was about sense of belonging and social engagement. And then after me, we have an incredible speaker joining us, Daniel Odernide, which he will be sharing his experiences and giving us a few nuggets to take with us. Then after Daniel, at 1:35 to 1:50, we have Apollo, who will also be exploring his research with you guys, which focuses on developing student networks to enhance the student's experience. And then after Apollo finishes explaining his project, we have a breakout room. The breakout room will be for 10 minutes. It literally allows us to have a discussion about what we've just listened to. And if you have any questions, that would be the perfect time to kind of engage and discuss it there. Then after the breakout room, we then have a spoken word artist, Dialectic Dee, joining us, and she'll be performing a poem for us. And then to conclude, we have questions and answers. I just want to thank everyone for joining the call and taking the time out to be here today. So thank you. So my name is Gerdine Zampangi. I am a business management graduate. I'm currently doing my master's in global financial management. In the past, I've previously done research on BAME females in the business industry. And for my master's, I currently conducted a research project about sense of belonging and social engagement for BAME students who commute. Sense of belonging and engagement for the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic commuting students. The purpose of my research was to understand how we can make Black, I'm just going to say BAME, so I've said it at once. The purpose of my research was to understand how we can make BAME students who commute to university feel more included. Most importantly, it was around improving BAME students' sense of belonging and social engagement. I'm just going to give you guys a quick summary of my project, which will help you grasp a concept about what my findings were and how I conducted it. My research question was, does the University of Roehampton social engagement have an impact on commuting students' sense of belonging and engagement in the BAME community? Understanding the concept of BAME was difficult as students felt that acronym didn't feel like it defined them. So BAME was referring to many different types of people in a group. The research project adopts a qualitative research approach as the method allows me to understand the BAME students at Roehampton University's lived experience. So it's imperative we begin by understanding the concept and definition of sense of belonging and social engagement. Macmillan and Chavis define sense of belonging as the feeling, belief, and expectation that one fits in a group and has a place there, a feeling of acceptance by a group and willingness to sacrifice for a group. That is sense of belonging. However, social engagement can be defined as a concept referring to the individual, collective, or institutional relations or involvement with some element of society, particularly in communities. So I gave you guys roughly what my project was about, but before actually diving into my project, it was important for me to understand the background information of sense of belonging and social engagement for BAME people or BAME students. So now we look at the society that, the society we're in and the behaviors that BAME people have to experience on a day-to-day basis. So racial inequality in the UK society has been highlighted in many events that have occurred in 2020 and 2021. For example, police brutality, the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a journalist on BBC saying a racial slur on national television, and we also have Meghan Markle's experience of joining the royal family. The racial inequality is a clear demonstration of what BAME people endure, not just racism, but also microaggression. Racial inequality in the educational environment. Racial inequality in education is a deep-rooted challenge that has been institutionalized. Black children in primary school and secondary school are 3 times more likely to be excluded than any other race. The lack of BAME representation is reflected in leadership and senior roles in the educational environment. The BAME attainment gap was 13% between 2017 and 2018. Racial inequality in education has an interrelationship with the ethnicity pay gap. Okay, so now this was the findings that had emerged from my study. So the BAME students who commuted to Roehampton University felt that these factors would increase sense of belonging and social engagement for them. So commuting students often had other important responsibilities. For example, BAME students that I spoke to whilst interviewing, they were students, they had jobs, they were parents, they were carers. The second finding that was highlighted through my study was financial decisions. The financial decision whether students stayed on hall or commuted was fundamental to what they chose, as living on campus was very expensive. Another finding that also was highlighted through my study was space and new buildings. For example, at the University of Roehampton, we have a few new buildings. For example, the library. The students felt that the new building and the modern space encouraged them to spend more time on campus. Also, BAME students who commuted found it difficult to make friends. And they also felt like they lacked social experiences at university because a lot of the time they would commute, they wouldn't spend as much time on campus. Another one of my findings were the online learning transition due to the pandemic. BAME students found it very challenging to access lecturers, and they also reported the online teaching as ineffective. So that was kind of hard for them to adjust, and quite frankly, we all had to adjust very promptly. Another one of my findings were the lack of BAME representation at the University of Roehampton is a barrier for sense of belonging. Students felt that in senior roles and leadership, BAME people were not reflected. So yeah, they weren't reflected there. Another one of my findings were comfortability provides sense of belonging for BAME students, and being involved in social clubs or societies makes BAME students feel like they feel more included. Finally, so my project was, I found what was the problem, but I also had to provide recommendations. So I think it's important I highlight them, and hopefully, you know, the university implements these recommendations and we make a change. So the 5 relevant recommendations that have been anticipated to bridge the gap between social environment of the university and the impact on BAME commuting students, the sense of belonging and social engagement are: 1, provide all BAME students with a student wellbeing officer. 2, provide financial support for those students in need. 3, develop virtual student events that allow students to connect, for example, today. 4, advance the online teaching to make it more effective for students. And 5, establish a racial diverse, strong leadership. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening to my project. And now I'm gonna be asking everyone polling questions. So it would just be great if you could give your answer in the chat. So the first question is, what would make you feel more included and give you a sense of belonging within the educational system? I'm gonna give a few minutes just so everyone can jot an answer in the chat. And the second question is, how do you define your ethnicity? It would also be great if you could just drop that in the chat as well. Okay, thank you. So now we have an incredible speaker joining us. He's my good friend. He's also my mentor. His name is Daniel Odernide. And Daniel is a first-class graduate in sociology, an entrepreneur, a public speaker, and a personal development advocate. You can find him on his social media there. Thank you.
Bismillah. Thank you, Gardine. First of all, again, thank you to Gardine for hosting this wonderful event. I think it's an amazing space that needs to happen in the time that we're in right now in society. Also, big thanks to Roehampton for allowing me to speak and to share my experiences on this platform as well. Kind of going off from what Gardine was saying, I am a first-class graduate from Middlesex University. I studied sociology with my dissertation being around the use of the N-word in contemporary British music. That saw me interview the likes of Kano and getting his experiences on the use of the N-word and what that means for identity in sort of like our society right now. Alongside that, I'm a personal development coach and a public speaker. My platform is Wisdom and Knowledge, which I started when I was 16. And I don't like being called a motivational speaker because motivation's a feeling. Like I could speak to an idiot, give him some motivation, and he's just a motivated idiot. He hasn't really changed. So I prefer personal development. And with Wisdom and Knowledge, we're all about changing perspectives with principles. And that's a little bit what I'll be talking about today as well, in terms of throwing in some nuggets that we can take away from today to sort of help make a change with the topics that we're talking about. And again, alongside that, I'm an entrepreneur with my own luxury bespoke oud products company called Odernide. That's all bespoke luxury products, from oud oils, sprays, body butters, and car accessories too. Going into what I'll be talking about today, I think it's important for us to be aware, and that's essentially the title of what I'll be talking about today, the importance of being aware. And what I mean about being aware, I mean the awareness of the struggle that we face as BAME individuals. It's important that we know what we're struggling with. We know what the struggle is all about before we can really sort of move on from that struggle. It's also important that we become aware of the cause of that struggle, because yes, it's one thing to feel pain, but to stop that pain from being felt, we need to know why that pain is coming. So it's awareness of the cause of the struggle. And then lastly, awareness of our potential. I think alongside all of this, although it might be quite a heavy topic to talk about in terms of struggle, in terms of pain, it's also important for us to know that we are able and we are capable of doing anything that we want to do. And with that being said, similar to what Gardine mentioned, I want to sort of clarify my stance on the BAME terminology. And I think it's not fair to group ethnic minorities into one terminology. I think, especially when you look at the Black race, it's important to understand that every single race on this earth is or has at some point discriminated against the Black people. So I think when we look at the Asian minority, when we look at other minorities, when we look at the Black minority, women's, religious minorities, it's important that we give them their fair sort of category. We give them and we look at them as who they are and not group a struggle in as one. With that being said, I'd like to shed some light upon being a BAME student and what that meant for me. Like I mentioned, I studied my undergrad degree at Middlesex University, and being there alongside going to college at St. Albans and also schooling up to high school, secondary school in Milton Keynes, what I learned was Black history from white mouths. I think it's fair to say that within our sort of the teaching faculty, we don't see people that look like ourselves. And I really, really struggled with that. I struggled hearing Black history from a white mouth. I struggled hearing the things that were connected to my race or my ethnicity, and I'm sure other people did, from a mouth that wasn't authentic. And I think to sort of open this up, I'm going to open up each segment with a quote. And Santan Dave, a rapper, said, "You don't know the truth about your race because they're erasing it." And I think what's extremely important is that we understand as ethnic minorities, myself as a Black man, whatever ethnic minority and group that you sort of are connected to, that you have the ownership to educate yourself on your own history, because we won't know the truth about it because they're erasing it. Like for myself, I was never taught that Nigeria was named by a white woman. I was never taught that 30% of the slaves that came into the United States of America were imported from Nigeria. The schooling system never taught me this. I was never taught that Nigeria was actually named after sort of like the Latin word Niger or Niger, which is black. I wasn't taught that Lagos is named after Laos in Portugal, which essentially meant that the Europeans were sort of taking over and just rebranding that city over there. And we weren't taught things such as how the UK invaded Australia and essentially committed a mass genocide, wiping around 96% of the Aboriginals. Like, these are things that we're not taught. And these are things that as ethnic people, we have to educate ourselves on, so we are woke, quote unquote, in the society that we're in. I think it's also important that we look at and we hold accountable our teaching faculty. I'm sure everybody, if everybody has, if not, if you haven't, I'll be talking upon it, has seen a sort of incident that happened with the SOAS director who used the N-word in a student meeting and was just extremely unremorseful for it. I think it's important that lecturers, that those within the teaching faculty really educate themselves and really become sympathetic to races, to people's struggles, and to slurs as well. Like, just because, again, you hear it in a rap song doesn't mean that it's okay for you to use. And I think it's very important that our academic institutions become aware of these things. Moving on from like my experiences as a BAME student, I'll be talking about my experiences within the real world and graduating from university and some of the things that I've experienced. And a quote that I'd like to say to open up this segment is from the last messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white, except by piety and good action. And I think as a believer, it's important that we take not just the words from the last messenger, but we understand that, again, when we cut, we all bleed red. We all bleed blood. A white man's blood doesn't look any different to a black man's blood. And it's important that we know that when we get into the real world, because the real world is crazy. Like I mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur who has started my own bespoke oud fragrance, and that sees me working a lot in the Middle East. It sees me navigating through different cultures. And I've experienced like sly racism being in the Middle East. I experienced going to specific places and being looked down upon, or when I'm speaking or when I'm sort of trying to navigate through those spaces, kind of being sort of pushed aside. And it's something that it's not easy to go through. Like, and as a black man, I guess, since I came out the womb, all I've known is that I just need to be 100 times better than anyone else. It's a principle that my mum always used to raise me up with. You have to be 100 times better than anyone else. Even if you're qualified, you have to be overqualified. And sometimes being overqualified doesn't even mean anything. But working in these different spaces, it's just shown me how, although we're in 2021, the struggles that were happening in the 60s are still prevalent. Again, like I mentioned, working within the Middle East, going into the faith of Islam, I still face, as a black man, I face intersectionality every day. I'm a black man, but I'm also a black Muslim, and I could go to a mosque where I could see a Muslim down the road, or go into an Asian shop. I could give my salam and I won't be reciprocated in the same way. I'll be looked at and people will be surprised, or they will just whisper and they'll just walk past me, or I'll just be ignored. And these are some of the intersectionalities that I face as a black Muslim. And I'm sure that whether you're a black woman, whether you're a black Muslim woman, a black hijabi woman, whether you're a disabled person, you face these intersectionalities as well. And I think it's very important that we make ourselves aware of them, and that the conversation goes from not the black man having to educate the white person or the non-black on how not to be racist, but the person who is being racist educating themselves. And that leads me on to like the next section, which is microaggressions. And I think it's very important that we understand that it's not enough anymore to not be racist. Like, we're in a time where, yeah, I'm not racist. That's not cool. Like, you have to be someone who is proactively trying to break down the causes of racism, break down the systems that have been really built up to do everything that they've been doing, especially when you look at the United States. Although people think that the policing system is supposed to be something that helps all people, it was never really built to do that. If you know about the 13th Amendment, you'll know that it was essentially an amendment that said that no man should be enslaved except one who commits a crime. And after the abolishment of slavery, you saw that the sort of financial state of the United States collapsed. And the only thing that they could do to sort of repair that was to imprison Blacks and to target Blacks. And essentially it does its job in terms of targeting the minorities. So I think it's extremely important that we understand that. And with my experiences of microaggressions, just like I'm sure many other individuals have faced, I remember working in a high-end fashion retail store, had my uniform on, had my name badge on, like I worked there. Like you could really see by my appearance that I worked there. And I saw a white lady looking at a pair of shoes, and I came over to her and I asked her if she needed any help. And her initial response, as she looked back at me, was to clinch her bag and then walk away. And it's one of those small moments where thankfully I had another brother who I could confide in, but I was just like, yo, bro, like, did you see what just happened over there? Like, how is she clinching her bag before anything? Like, she sees my name tag. It's not like I've got a hoodie on. It's not like I'm coming to her with any threat. Like, I'm wearing uniform. I've got my name tag on. And her first thing was to clinch her bag. And there's some of the small things that we face on an everyday basis. Like, I can go to a conference, and I've spoken at school conferences, teacher conferences, sort of motivational engagements. And I've always been told after I speak, you sound so eloquent. I never expected you to sound like this. And it's like, what did you expect me to sound like? Like, how is it? Because like, what do Black people sound like? Like, I'm just speaking how I speak. And it's important that, again, like I mentioned before, that not just teaching faculty, but non-Blacks really check themselves as to how they sort of approach ethnic minorities, how they approach Black people, women. Like, I'm sure Black women have been very vocal in the classroom and they've been told that they're being aggressive. Like, I remember being in school, and if we were a group of Black boys coming in from the field or playing football, we would be seen as a bunch of large kids who were just causing a ruckus. But if you saw a large group of white boys, people wouldn't think anything like that. And if we were doing the same thing, just talking, just laughing, people wouldn't see that the same. So I think it's important that we really, really change the perspective of how we view things, how we view Black people, how we view ethnic minorities. And I think it comes to the next segment, which is about what can what can you do? And the reason why I say what can you do is, in light of the horrific death of Sarah Avard and the sexual harassment towards women, the talk has shifted from sort of teaching, or better yet, protecting your girls from having this happen to you. And it's now changed to, how do you educate your boys? And I think when it comes to racism, when it comes to discrimination, the talk has to be shifted from what can Black people do to deal with racism, or what can Muslims do to deal with Islamophobia. And it has to be shifted to, what can those who are committing the racism, committing the discrimination do to stop this? Like, the ownership of this stopping shouldn't now be on the person who is having this inflicted on them. It doesn't make sense anymore. And it's something that really has to be vocalized, and it's something that non-Blacks, is something that whites, is something that other ethnic minorities, whether they discriminate against Blacks or whether they're discriminating against another ethnic group, they really need to start having this conversation. And we need to be the people who have this conversation, because more times than not, the older generations won't have it, because you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but we need to be the ones who spark this conversation. And it brings me on to the second one, in terms of changing the ideologies that we have, the microaggressions, the preconceptions, the stereotypes. It's up to non-Blacks, it's up to whites, it's up to other individuals to really change their ideologies, educate themselves, watch things, read things. I'm currently watching Amend on Netflix, and it's something that's been blowing my mind, just in terms of what the 14th Amendment is all about. I'm learning about Frederick Douglass. I'm learning about all these different things. And it's something that, again, not just Black people, not just other minorities have to do. Everybody has to do it. And I think lastly is having a conversation with BAME students. As we're in an academic environment, it's teaching faculty and lecturers having a conversation with ethnic students, with Black students, to hear their thoughts and to sympathize with their experience. It's not enough just to have Black kids in your class. It's not enough just to have Asians or Muslim hijabi girl in your class. Speak to them, like understand their trauma, understand their experiences, so you can better build a relationship with them. I think the best portrayal. Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, that was nice.
Oh, no problem. I think the best portrayal of how effective the educational system can be is the movie The Freedom Writers. And if every lecturer could be like Erin Gruwell, if every lecturer could take the time, and if every teacher from a primary school to secondary school to university level could take the time to really build a relationship, to really learn about our students, learn about the experiences that they're facing, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. Because when you understand the educational system, a lecturer, a teacher sees a student more than their family. Like, think about that. A lecturer and a teacher will see that a student more than their family does, because they'll go to school, they'll go to university for an 8-9 hour day, or maybe a little bit longer if they're doing extracurricular activities, and they'll come home. They'll probably spend an active span within the week of maybe 2.5, 3, 4 hours awake with their family, and then they're sleeping for another 8 hours. So I think it's very, very important that our lecturers, that our teachers, and that the academic and the educational system really takes this time to understand that we need to be like Erin Gruwell. If we want to better our students, if we want to better their future, we need to get to know them. And on that note, my name is Daniel Odernide. I'm here with Wisdom and Knowledge, and that is my section. From that,
So sorry to interrupt, but I have a question for you. So as an entrepreneur, like, what challenges have you faced, especially because you come from a Black background? Like, how challenging was it for you?
If I'm totally honest with you, we'll be doing a Q&A. I don't want to take up the next speaker's time. So if you could just hold on to that question, it will be amazing for the Q&A at the end. And I guarantee I'll answer that for you. But I do have polling questions alongside Gerdine. And my first one for you guys, please, if you could just maybe put a yes or no answer to it. It is, do you believe the educational system does a good job in teaching a diverse curriculum? That's my first question. I'll give some time for you guys to do that. And then I'll go into my second one, please. There's a reoccurring answer that begins with N. And then the second one is, should there be an authentic student and lecturer-led session on topics of cultural histories? And what I mean by this is, if there isn't, if you're in an institution and there isn't a Black lecturer, can a white lecturer connect? Would it be good for a white lecturer to connect with a Black student or a Muslim hijabi woman or an Asian woman when they're talking about those sorts of histories, to make it more authentic? What do you think about that? That's my second question. And I'm seeing some answers come in. And again, thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to hand over to Gerdine to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Daniel. Such a powerful and relevant segment. Thank you so much. Next, we have Apollo, who's previously produced a consultancy project about developing student networks to enhance the student experience.
Next slide. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Apollo. I'm in a similar position to Gerdine. I'm a graduate at Roehampton, and I'm currently doing my master's in global financial management. So I'm going to be speaking more about some of the solutions to the issues raised so far in this conference from a more academic perspective. So my recent master's research project was titled Developing Student Networks to Enhance the Student Experience, with a focus on how development aspects have changed due to remote operations. My original research question focused on how student networks and learning communities can be maintained with the changed programs delivery mechanisms. However, today I'm going to be speaking about the student experience from a more general perspective, with a focus on the key themes of creating a sense of belonging and engagement, as I think this is very important for BAME students. The main clients and stakeholders alongside the Roehampton Business School were Christopher Stevens and the Susanna Wesley Foundations, who approved my research topic as it fits in with their missions and their values. The Susanna Wesley Foundation aims to build communities by promoting dialogue and research, and it's based in the university in Southlands College, which is headed by Christopher Stevens. Slide before, one before that. Okay, so as the researcher, I feel that improving student networks through sticky campus methods is essential to student engagement and the constant progression of educational institutions based on primary and secondary research. My research objectives were a few more, a bit longer than that, but I picked these three as I think that they are relevant to the conference today. So the first one is to identify which student networks and services have the highest impact on engagement. Secondly, to identify which student networks and services are in the highest demand for improvements, and to rate the concern for student well-being as it's been done remotely. So I did a literature review, which I'm sure you all know what that's about. So I've looked at loads of different books and articles about different people's opinions on student engagement and why it's important. And the overall sense that I got from that is that socializing at university is very important, and that's been said by many professional people within the higher education industry, such as vice chancellors and founders of design companies for student spaces within the UK. So this is just a background to show you that my questionnaire was given out to many different students across the university, different year groups, different living arrangements, nationalities and genders, different courses, employment status. These are just the demographics that I looked at. And I gave out a survey to 50 to 70 students, can't remember the exact number, just asking them about their experience at university and all the different networks and how they rated it. So the conclusions that I drew was that the Students' Union has the greatest positive impact on engagement and has the highest ratings. I think this student network should be used most in order to improve the experience for BAME students. The university has held events such as the Black History Month virtual lecture on history and enterprise. Another example of an event they've done was the BAME Staff Network event, which was open to staff, students and graduates to share their thoughts and feelings following the George Floyd's death and the Black Lives Matter, which is, I guess, a similar conference to what we're doing now. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is careers. I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, will know of the Roehampton careers link. It's a link that I'm very familiar with, which regards information and opportunities that can be targeted at BAME students, such as the top 50 inclusive employers, BAME recruitment companies and networks such as the BYP, which is the Black Young Professionals Network. And I can personally vouch for all of these things because they are things I have used, and I have accessed many webinars to help me with my career plans. You can access the careers link via the internet from the uni website, which will be on the top of the screen if you just click more, and then you'll see careers. You can also see it from the students portal. So yeah, in conclusion, I would encourage everyone to just engage with the activities the university has and all the incentives, and yeah, just keep an eye out for anything that you think could be beneficial to you. Keep track of your emails, keep track of the students portal, and you'll see all the events the university has in place that are targeted at BAME students. So thank you for listening. So I have two quick polling questions. So I was meant to have a multiple choice, but my first one is, which of these business networks are specifically targeted at BAME students? My first option was the BYP network. My next was LinkedIn, and the last one was the BNI network. So you can put your answer down in the chat. I have mentioned it. And my second question is, which of these is not an avenue to access the careers link? And my options would have been the students portal, Moodle, or Moodle. So whichever one you think it is, just drop it down in the chat. Nice and easy questions. So I'll pass you back to Gerdine, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Apollo. Thank you, Apollo. So next, currently we have a breakout room. So this is the time you can ask all your questions regarding all the previous speakers. It's like you can use this next 10 minutes for like a debate, discussion, or anything that needs to be highlighted. So yeah, you'll be allocated in different rooms and we can have the debate. Yeah, we had a really good discussion in my group.
Likewise, same here.
What did you lots get from your breakout room? We could have like 3 minutes spare.
Wanna go first?
Yeah, go on, Daniel.
Yeah.
Nah, Dee's gone first.
Everyone should be back. I think back in the main room now. I've jotted down a few notes as well, and I think Dee was in my room too. So I mean, I'm happy, and Dee as well, happy to share, I guess, what we heard. And also, you know, I'm sure the other hosts of the other room as well are happy to share as well. So, you know, just feel free to call on us if you want that to feed into the Q&A, or we can do that now, whatever you want.
I think we should do it now. I think we should. So
Yeah. So who's going first?
you can go first.
Are you sure?
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay, so sorry, Daniel, because I know you wanted to speak. I'll be quick, but basically, I feel like our room, we spoke a lot on diversity and like issues that we faced, about how we were treated differently to our other counterparts when it came to like, I guess, equipment or like pitching an actual problem. Well, not pitching, but like talking about an actual problem within like the infrastructure of the school. And yeah, I feel like that pretty much summarizes in a very brief way what we discussed.
Thank you, Dee, for sharing that with us. And I think it's important to discuss it and really understand it. Daniel, you can share what you were talking about in your breakout room.
Yeah, I think our breakout room was very, very productive. I think we had Megan, who was a lecturer, and who's actually, I think she mentioned that she's lectured and she taught you and Apollo as well, which was pretty authentic to have sort of like a lecturer's take on things, but also a lecturer who, from the conversation that we had, seemed to understand it from both sides of the pendulum, which was very, very productive in terms of holding the lecturers and the teachers accountable for trying to make the learning as productive for the students as possible. We also had Maria, who shed light on being an international student, which again, I think is very, very important, that although we're talking about BAME, Black ethnic minority people, we should also look at people who are just different on the basic level, in terms of someone who has left their home nation and come into this country to learn. How can we make the space also engaging for them and better for them? And I think it was Manel who shed light on just learning during a pandemic and how that's been, how that's felt. And I think for me, who graduated before a pandemic, not too much light can be shed upon that topic from my perspective, unfortunately, because I don't know how it feels, but I've had a secondary school reach out asking me to create material for students, for their year 13 students. And I think on one side of the pendulum, it's easy for the teachers and the schools to blame the students for not being productive without holding themselves accountable. And on the other side, it's very easy for the students to say that the lecturer or the teacher isn't helping me out when they're not applying themselves the best way they can at home. So yeah, it was a very good conversation, which definitely deserves more time. So Gardine, you might have to do a part 2 on this or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we discussed in our breakout room was literally about increasing engagement. How do we get students to tell lecturers and make them adapt to what's going on in the world, and also be learnt that in modules? So that conversation was very interesting. We touched on things like investment. We touched on things about, like, you know, bringing the now into education. So yeah, I think it's time to move on to our next speaker. We have Dialectic Dee, who is a sickle cell advocate. She's a poet, she's a spoken word artist, and she's done this before. She's absolutely great. So yeah, Dee, you can take the floor.
Hey guys, thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I just want to say a massive thank you to Geraldine for having me, and yeah, so far I've enjoyed all the speakers' important informative points that have been made throughout the day. So I appreciate all of you guys. As Geraldine said, I go by the stage name of Dialectic Dee. And yeah, I mean, she's kind of said a lot of what I do, but I also produce events. So I run my own night called Melodic Vibes, where we celebrate, recognize and champion emerging singers, songwriters, poets, rappers, etc.
At the moment, I've been advocating a lot for sickle cell, which in the pandemic actually started to go viral because I have a long-term blood condition called sickle cell, and we have to pay for our medications. I've been doing that, having it soon, which me and my manager have been working very hard on. So yeah, there's a lot going on with me, but that's enough rambling, and I'll probably just get right into my poem for today. So the piece that I'm going to do for you today is called Dear Sisters, and I hope you enjoy. We live in a culture where choice is an illusion and it's impossible to win. In a culture where bashing, judging, criticizing and shaming women for their decisions and choices is very in. In a culture where women are constantly being put down on a daily basis for embracing the very things that shape our gender and identity, for exploring our womanhood, for simply living in our own skin. In a culture where women who wear makeup and weave are accused of being filled with self-doubt, self-hate, acceptance issues and low self-esteem. In a culture that insinuates women are incapable of thinking for themselves, so give in to societal pressures of who and what we should be. Should this be? Why should we be made to feel sorry and apologetic for our choices? Why can't our choices just be our choices? Why can't we be seen exactly the way we are and still be seen as queens and treated highly? Dear sisters, you are an equation that at first glance, not many people will understand. But remember to always stay true to your authenticity, for that is what makes you uniquely you. Never allow anyone to dim your light. Always shine. Just because they may not understand the magic, the uniqueness, and the beauty that you possess, it doesn't mean that you should ever dilute your sweetness for the sake of other people's taste buds, so it's easier for them to digest. We live in a world that is so busy looking for cracks that they don't realize how whole we truly are. So let us learn to love and own the skin that we are in, even if it is thick with concealer and highlight, makeup and contour, or as natural as the day when we were born. Let us learn to love the various hairstyles we wear, even if it is braids or weave, permed or natural, whether we rarely change it up or change it up every other week. Let us learn to love our bodies, thick or slim, tall or short. The most important thing that we as women can wear is our confidence. It is not their job to like us, it's ours. Our self-validation is all that matters. So let us proudly own all that we are. Thank you. I go by the stage name of Dialectic Dee. If you'd like to hear more of my work, you can find me mainly on Instagram, but I'm on all social media sites. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you so much. I think that poem was very, very relevant. As we all know, we are in Women's History Month, and it's all about embracing women. And this conference focuses on BAME. So just, you know, that interacting with each other was absolutely great. Thank you so much, Dialect Dee. And now we actually have time.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Now we actually have time for a discussion. Was there anything that, you know, caught someone's attention whilst this conference was going on that they would like to discuss and get answers or questions to? If so, please raise your hand and either Lewis or Shabir will allow you to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Gerdine. I know Megan had a question earlier in the chat and Megan's got her hand up at the moment. So should we go over to Megan first?
Hi. Well, first of all, hi, Gerdine and Apollo. It's so nice to see you again. I haven't seen you in about, what is it, a year and a half or something now? So really, really nice to see you both and see your research presentations earlier on. They were great. So Daniel mentioned this earlier because I mentioned it in the breakout rooms, but having this session as something that I wouldn't necessarily call it compulsory, but maybe part of teacher training. So the lecturers should be here. They should be hearing all of this, and they should know what you're saying rather than trying to guess or assume from your body language or how you're engaging in lectures and seminars. So having something like this, again, I think the format was perfect in terms of how much time we had in breakout rooms, the differences in presentations. I think that was fine. But I think in having it as something that, don't call it compulsory, because that sounds, it just doesn't, it doesn't sound great when you call something compulsory. But if it was part of something like teacher training or learning and teaching training, I think that would be great, because they need to hear what you're saying.
Daniel, would you like to answer the question, or should I?
Oh no, I agree with Megan. I think it's extremely important. I shed light upon it in our breakout room. It's like I said before, you can't help someone without asking them what they need help with. And I think sometimes teachers use not hearing a student's voice to their advantage of, well, I didn't know this. Like, well, they didn't tell me this. But when you put them in a space where they can actually have a conversation and more times just listen, I think sometimes our lecturers just need to listen as much as they do teach, as much as they do talk. Sometimes they just need to listen to us so that they can talk to us better and teach us better. Because when you don't tell someone how to change, it's like you need to stop people sliding before they begin to start ice skating. And if you don't tell someone what they could be doing wrong, they will always continuously do that until it's right. Until someone tells them, because they just see it as right. So I completely agree. And I think, like Megan said, this space definitely should be something that teachers, again, she said that it shouldn't be made compulsory and it should be put in a sort of like a teacher training way. But I think, again, to another degree, it needs to be something that, just like any type of training, it has to be mandatory. It has to be ticked off. It has to be put into, maybe there needs to be a new bracket within the educational system that makes listening to students' voices part of their role. Because if it's not, and we don't hold them accountable, most of them won't do it. So that's what I have to say on it.
No, I agree. And I think it is very fundamental we hear BAME students' voice. And also, hi, Megan, it's been a while since I've seen you. Yeah, I think that's something that the university with senior, members of staff will have to discuss. Can you guys incorporate hearing BAME students' voice? So like Daniel said, if you listen, you may learn something, and it may change the sense of belonging and inclusiveness and social engagement. So yeah, I do think it should be mandatory, but it's all about having the conversations. And this is the first step, I believe.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with staff, and I've had it here with you today with students, but I haven't had one where it's both together. And I think that's the issue. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any, any questions, wants to say something? If you do, just raise your hand.
I think Natalie had a question from earlier on. I don't know if she's still in here or she still wanted to ask that question. It just struck my mind now.
Yep, she is still in the room, and that question was about your experience becoming an entrepreneur and any barriers that you might have faced. If you were happy to share your experiences and elaborate maybe on your journey in entrepreneurship as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think one of the basic barriers that I faced in terms of entrepreneurship and pursuing that is the difficulty in terms of getting assistance and getting help. I think we're sometimes still in a society, and this isn't even just on a BAME level, this is just overall in society, where nobody wants to give a handout whilst they're trying to get their own. Like, no one wants to share some of their food whilst they're still eating it. So I've had to sort of learn how to still be giving, still be meek enough to help out where I can. And it's part of what wisdom and knowledge is all about. It's my philosophy is, why can't you share a page out of the book that you're writing to help somebody else maybe not get to that point as they're writing their own book? And that's why I love wisdom and knowledge, because it's about me sharing the life experiences that I've gone through to the younger generation or to the older generation, so that hopefully with those lived experiences, because I've told you, you won't have to live through that. It's kind of like sometimes it's kind of like you can learn through two different ways. You can learn through experiences, or you can learn through sort of information. And it's definitely a lot more easier to learn through information and being told something and observing something. Another of the difficulties that I've faced has been, again, like I mentioned, as a Black Muslim male, navigating through the Middle East and navigating through different cultures and places around the world. I do get faced with stereotypes, whether that is navigating through business sort of negotiations, and people don't think that I know the industry because I'm not Arab or because I'm not from the Middle East, or whether it's even locally at the masjid, if I'm going to the mosque, or if I'm seeing another brother or someone else and being sort of cascaded and pushed to the side, or not looked at, or not sort of respected like they would respect one of their own peers. So there are definitely difficulties that I face. And how did I overcome them? I think the way in which I overcome them, so I touched on the first one just in terms of being someone who I don't even care how people maneuver. Like, I have my own set of principles that I live by, and I'm always about, Lord, like the dua that I make, the prayer that I make is, Lord, may my cup be full so it can always run over. So no matter if I'm asking someone, like I recently asked to get a sister for help in a new venture that I'm taking, and her advice was just be persistent. Like, I'm a personal development coach. I know how to be persistent. I'm asking you for particular help. But then I just took that on the chin, and I asked another sister, and she was able to give me a whole bunch of information. So for me, that's how I answered that one. In terms of sort of navigating through diverse surroundings, it's just holding myself accountable to the type of person that I am. It's knowing my source. It's knowing that even if you don't think that, even if you look down upon me, or you don't think that I can do this, I know my source, I know my worth, I am the jewel. Positive affirmations I tell myself in those moments. And I don't care what people think, because people don't think. Like, I actually don't care what people think, because people don't think. So more times than not, it's not even about someone else helping you. It's about how you carry yourself and how you think, because the barriers that you feel like you face in life are because of thoughts that you've created here. Like, I'll say that one more time. The barriers that you think and that you do face in life are because of the thoughts that you create here. So once you change your perspective, you'll be able to sort of change the things that you experience. And that's what I hold myself accountable to, is changing perspective through principles. That's what wisdom and knowledge is.
Thank you, Daniel. I think that's really, yeah, I was just going to say thank you as well, because I think that's really well put. And I think when you attend events and activities like today as well, and you engage with others, those authentic voices, then you really do change the dimensions of your mind. And I think that every step we take to learn from others, learn more, not just engage and listen, but to speak to people from different cultures, different faiths, as you've said, Daniel, as well, then it really changes the dimensions of our minds. And I think that's a commitment that we should all look to ourselves to make as well. I'm going to hand over to Dialectic Dee, who's also got a hand up as well. So your question.
Thank you. I'm so inspired by all of these points. I feel like every single person who's spoken today has had something so relevant to say, like whether that's like a teacher or a student or just an outsider, or in like everyone's just got so much important things. But anyway, my point was, what was my actual point? I feel like I'm so inspired. Like, I just want to say thank you. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say. Thank you. And like, if you have any more of these, please do let me know. Like, I would love to just come back and be a part of it. I think this platform is incredible. And I wish like so many more people, even if it was like maybe doing it on a larger scale. And I know it's quite an in-house thing, but like maybe an Instagram live, or just getting loads of students to come in, whether that's like any background type student, or if you guys feel it needs to be more specific to like BAME communities, then how do we plug it to more unis so that these conversations are had on a larger scale? Because I feel like the work that you guys have put into this, the research, everything, like I feel like it deserves a bigger audience. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to say was thank you.
Thank you, Dialectic Dee. And yeah, there was a lot of work put into this, and I'm actually quite happy with the outcome. And I know this is just the beginning. Like, there's more conversations that need to be had with more people, senior people, and that's how we dismantle things and make change. So in the future, we do have to incorporate other universities and do make it on a wider scale. But I think I'm just proud to be a part of Roehampton University, trying and recognising that there is an issue here of sense of belonging for BAME students. So just being a part of that, for me, I felt it was very satisfying. It was very like, okay, they are recognising that, you know, in some ways, I don't necessarily feel like there's a full sense of belonging here. So yeah, and with what you just said and like move it on, I just want to conclude the conference, and I want to thank every single person that joined today. Thank you for taking the time to just log in and listen and learn. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.